Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Winter Gardening Challenge. I am here with Katie Krejci of the Homesteading RD. If you're familiar with her on Instagram, she has just been blowing up. It is so exciting to have her on today. I'm just going to be asking her tons of questions about what it's like growing through the winter, where she's growing, which people are going to be like, wait, you can't grow anything there at all. And maybe you're going to learn some things. So I'm really excited about being joined with my friend Katie with the Homesteading RD. Katie, welcome to the Winter Garden Challenge.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. I'm just excited to be here. And winter is pretty much a year-round activity here in Minnesota. So I think we'll have lots to chat about.
Awesome. Well, Minnesota, that's pretty, like when I think of Minnesota, I think of, am I thinking correctly? Boundary Waters canoe area, beautiful summers, like cool summers, like deep Northwoods, and then just like snow capped from, in my mind, like November on till like May. Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. We even had snow in October last year, so even a little bit longer than that.
Oh my goodness. As an Arizona like boy, I'm going, I don't know how I could do in that environment. That's wild.
It's not for everybody, that's for sure. Now, I will say the Boundary Waters are like pretty much Canada, like as far north as you can go. Gorgeous up there. We're not quite that far north, but we're pretty close. We're definitely in the Northwoods.
Pretty close. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself, your homesteading journey. You have this like Homesteading RD Instagram handle that's been blowing up and everyone's wanting to know about it. You have tons of great beta and just information regarding homesteading, your homesteading journey. Kind of talk me through what got you started in homesteading.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a wild ride on how did I even get here. Never in a million years did I think I would be doing this on social media and living here in this remote homestead on a large property. But basically how it started, it was just kind of a whim. I got married while I was still in school and I had the summer off, and this was 2008, and I was trying to figure out something to do with my blank summer. And it was actually Ryan's idea. He's like, hey, you should start a garden. We were in this tiny little house with a little yard. And I was like, sure, I'll try that. And I just took a shovel and I just kind of turned over some of our grass and put seeds directly in the ground. Like I probably had $15 into this garden, and it did pretty darn good. I was hooked. It wasn't my best garden ever, but it was a great start. And from then on, I just kept kind of expanding a little bit more. I decided to grow a grapevine up my chain link fence. And, instead of putting a new tree in along our driveway, we decided to do a fruit tree. So every little step along the way. And then we were in that little house for about 5 years. So I'd say we were kind of urban homesteading. I don't even think I knew what the word homesteading was at the time. It was just
yeah, in 2008. I mean, that was early in the journey for sure.
Yeah.
Now, that's up in Minnesota, right? You're still in the same area? Or?
Question. So I am originally from Minnesota, but I went to college in Nebraska, and then I followed Ryan to Kansas City to finish school, and we lived in Kansas City, that's where our first home was. So I started urban homesteading in Kansas City. So a warmer climate. So I have dabbled my toes a little bit in that heat. And that was wonderful though. Like my rosemary would come back every year, which I can't get to survive in Minnesota. But then we were kind of itching for more. I knew that I would always wanted to live in the country. My husband Ryan grew up on an acreage, and so we finally had enough pennies saved up to where we were able to get our 5-acre homestead, and that's when we moved to Minnesota. I kind of had it with the heat. It was time to go home, and Ryan was willing to go with me, thankfully. And so, we found this little 5-acre homestead, and that's where it really started to kind of evolve.
Okay.
And it was never like this big overarching plan, like preparing for doomsday. And, I wouldn't say that we're preppers necessarily. It's just kind of out of joy and passion. I'm an independent person by nature and always looking for that next step.
So is homesteading as a lifestyle move more than a think style or a prepper style or anything other than that. It's just like, hey, we're moving into this lifestyle of maybe some sustainable living and just kind of growing what we can and being a producer rather than, a consumer, right?
Yeah, it's very empowering. And plus, as a dietitian, I'm naturally interested in nutritional quality and
Right.
freshness and having control of my food source. And so just all of those really came together to become a homesteader for sure.
Wow. And so you jumped into what year did you decide to, hey, let's track with some of the social media stuff and share what we're doing and share our story out there for the entire world to see?
Yeah, it's a little terrifying when I think about it. I'm deeply introverted. So even just like thinking about how many people might actually be seeing the content on the other end is a little terrifying. But
Yeah.
that's actually fairly new. So I started the Homesteading RD in the fall of 2021.
Okay.
Prior to that, I was sharing little bits, mostly to my friends on Instagram. I've always
Mhm.
enjoyed kind of sharing what we're doing and kind of exposing this world to people. It wasn't very popular,
Mhm.
until really the last 5 years, I would say. And so what happened in the fall of 2021 is I quit my conventional job. So up until then, I was working as a clinical dietitian in big metro hospitals, just doing conventional medicine and hospital food and poor quality ingredient tube feedings. And the deeper I got into homesteading and really learning about food and using real food to heal my own like gut issues and things that I was struggling with, I really got to realize that, this conventional model is really starting to rub me. I don't feel like I really believe in the work that I'm doing here anymore. And I eventually quit kind of on a whim, which is not me at all. Normally, I'm very planned and methodical. And it was time to make my move. And I feel like God was just giving me a strong message like, you need to do it. You just need to do it. We'll figure it out. And I did go back to school for functional nutrition. So that's kind of the whole opposite side of the world of nutrition, where you're really looking at healing the root cause instead of symptom management. And I did work as a functional dietitian for a couple of years, actually. It's something, that piece I don't talk about quite as much. But that really formed a bridge for me. So I at least was able to kind of jump into a different workforce, I guess, for a little bit after I had quit. But while I was pursuing that, and what that looked like for me was one-on-one client consultations virtually. So I was able to start working from home, which was great. But I just had this voice in the back of my head saying, this is a great move for now. So you can kind of like still make money somehow after you quit your job, but keep kind of thinking about where you want to go. What are you most passionate about? And I just kind of had this thought that I should just share a little bit more on Instagram of these things that I'm doing. And now that I was working from home, I had more time to do homesteading things. And I started to basically notice that people were interested in what I was doing, and it was gaining traction slowly. Slow growth is very slow in the beginning on social media. And I built a website too. And really that first year, I was just kind of snailing along, slowly growing. So I'm glad I, did the functional nutrition consulting for a while. But by the time things really started to take off and everything, I got to a point where I was basically doing 2 full-time jobs. It was doing this client one-on-one care, virtual functional nutrition, and then the homesteading RD. So I was creating content evenings and weekends and seeing clients all day. And I got to a point where I was like, I'm going to have to make a choice. I do one or the other. And the reason why I picked the homesteading RD, so I did quit my clinic work about a year ago. So spent about a year doing the homesteading RD full time. But really my epiphany was, where can I make the most impact? Where can I help the most people? And really this was the way to go for me, because I could really help people in a preventative way. So my biggest frustration over here is I was trying to help people heal and recover from the damage already done by our modern living and our modern lifestyles, which is still important and powerful work. We need to help people who have had that damage done. But I needed to get further upstream. Like, how can I help people from getting to that point in the first place, and just like living a clean lifestyle and just getting back to the basics. And so, yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster of a few years, and I still don't really know where I'm going. I feel like I'm making it up every day, but it's been so rewarding, and I just love this lifestyle, and I love that so many people are also interested in it. I feel like for many years there I was the weirdo, and like the people at work were like, how's the farm? You know, like they didn't really understand what I was doing over there. And it's just so cool to see so many people kind of starting to recognize it and wanting to do the same.
Right. Man, I love that. And so, I mean, we don't know where we're going, but we do know where we're at. I mean, a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about where you're at. I mean, you're in Minnesota, homesteading on 5 acres still?
Great question. So that has also recently changed. Basically, once I quit my hospital job, I had this epiphany one evening, and I looked at Ryan and I was like, we don't have to live on this 5-acre homestead that's driving distance to Minneapolis anymore, because we had to stay within city limits so I could make that hour commute each way. It was awful. Yeah, I don't miss that at all. And Ryan's job pretty much went remote after 2020 and was going to stay that way forever. And so I was like, wait a minute, we can live wherever we want now. Like, whoa, what do we actually want the rest of our lives to look like? And it was just like such a freeing moment that I hadn't even really thought about or let myself think about, well, what could be possible for us. And we had been at that 5-acre homestead from 2013, and then 2023 is when we moved. So we were there for 10 years, and we had kind of maxed it out. We had done everything we wanted to do to it, and we were ready. And we're honestly kind of bored. We're like to constantly be busy, and we were done with projects. We had built all the things we wanted to do. And so we were like, you know what, you only live once, let's go for it. And we decided we wanted to go for a minimum of 100 acres, but ideally 200.
So that's a jump. So you went from a few seeds in the backyard, a $15 garden, to a 5-acre homestead, to over 100 acres.
Yeah, we looked for a year and a half, actually. We were pretty picky about what we wanted. And land is hard in Minnesota. Either it's cleared, like agricultural farmland, which is insanely expensive. That was not in our budget. Or it's dense woods. And then you also have a lot of wetlands, lowlands, unusable land that's highly protected and you can't touch it type thing. And so we had to look for a long time to find affordable land that was usable. And we finally found it. And so it's 240 acres, which was more than we were hoping for, but we're happy to have it. And it's just been wild. We moved in a little over a year ago, and it's been an adjustment. So we had to give up a lot of things to make this work. So our 5-acre homestead we just had remodeled the whole house. It was beautiful. And Ryan, he's a gearhead, so he had a 6,000 square foot heated shop, which he loved. He pretty much lived out there. And then we moved to this place, and now we're in a 960 square foot hunting cabin with an outhouse, and we're line drying laundry and hand washing dishes, and the mosquitoes are outrageous. I pretty much garden in my head to toe bug suit, and it's crazy out here, but we love it. It's just every day is an adventure. You never know what's going to happen. And really, we have so many options out here, I guess, like unlimited projects. So it's been super fun.
So what growing zone would you technically be categorized in?
So when it was zone 3B, and then when they redid the zones again, I'm back to 4A.
Okay.
Which is what I was at the 5-acre homestead.
Okay. So it was 3B, and for 4A. So what's your latitude? Do you know like what your latitude coordinates are?
I think I'm between like 46 and 47 degrees.
Okay. And latitude isn't always an indicator of, you know, the cold spectrum. There's a lot at play there. So for those of us who are Southern growers, please describe we're getting snow in October. We're getting snow all the way through May. It's not really melting off through the season. It gets very, very cold. You've got like a frost line that's so deep? How deep is your frost line?
It's about 6 to 7 feet deep. So if you want to bury a dependable water line, the rule of thumb is minimum 8 feet deep.
Okay, so an 8 feet deep water line. Do they still bury people at 6 feet deep? Like, that's so deep. Oh my gosh. I
don't know. But it's
I don't
something
know.
to think about.
So like, I'm thinking of the Arizona context, or even like where I'm at now, like the frost line is kind of like 18 inches deep. You're probably safe. Most people are burying at like 2 feet to 3 feet, somewhere there, but like 8 feet deep.
Yeah, I bet they are doing it that deep. Yeah.
Whoa.
And it makes it really challenging when we're talking water lines to a garden and all that, for sure.
So what are your sustained temperatures like in the dead of winter? Does it fluctuate at all? Like in the daytime, what's a warm day in the coldest part of winter? I'm assuming it's January.
January is usually the coldest. Sometimes our highs won't even get out of the negatives. Sometimes our high will be -5 and then our lows will be -35 or so. Now, I will say this year was exceptionally mild. It was kind of a really odd winter. So we haven't had a super brutal one for a couple of years now. But yeah, but I would say on average, we're probably in the teens to the 20s. Sometimes we'll pop into the 40s, but not all that often.
So in this winter garden challenge, it is an extreme challenge to grow anything in the winter at all. So let's just talk about like, what are we producing kind of in the summer, fall months? Like, how late can you get things to produce, and what might it look like for you doing a winter garden, because your winter starts so early, right?
Yeah, it really is challenging, and you have to be very crafty about the gardening season because it is so short. It's kind of like a science experiment, I guess. You kind of have to like have it all planned out just right. And if something goes wrong, like, you're screwed for that one plant. There's no do-overs.
Right.
So you are correct. There's no growing, in the depths of winter when there's feet of snow and it's super frigid and cold, which is where a greenhouse comes in. So maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But so my strategy is trying to grow as much food as I can during the few months that I do have, and growing cold tolerant crops. So brassicas are my jam. They're actually, I think I have my best batch of brassicas ever this year. They're doing so good. They like our cooler temps. They tolerate frost pretty well. They even taste a little bit better after some frost. So those I'm usually able to pick through October, beginning of October, usually, depending on how aggressively the winter sets in. But typically our first frost is kind of mid-September. So the bulk of the garden is out by that point. So our tomato plants, peppers, squash, that type of a thing. So food preservation is huge for us because I'm basically needing to preserve 9 months worth of food during, where I can only grow about 3 months. So it is go time come August, September. We're just kind of packing away everything we can.
So what does that look like for you in terms of like a summer garden? I know we want to stay focused on winter garden, but I mean, you have so much daylight hours. You have a lot of daylight hours, so it's a very fast and furious growing season because of that.
Yep.
And it's growing so fast. You're trying to stay ahead of weeds. You're trying to stay ahead of everything. And then you're trying to like put up and can in a very, very short window of time. How much do you put up through a summer? Like, is that an every single week you're canning from a certain season to a certain season? And how many jars do you own?
That's a great question. I haven't done a head count on jars. I should probably do that, and it's just the two of us, so my numbers aren't as impressive as a big family. Sometimes I see people's pantries and I'd be like, oh wait, remember, Katie, they also have 6 children. They have way more mouths to feed than I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, we kind of do a little bit of everything, and I like to do a variety of food preservation methods. So I have a freeze dryer. I like to go that route. I like to put stuff in the deep freeze. I also like to can. And
by that, you just mean set it out on the front porch, right?
For what?
To put it in the deep freeze. You just set it out on the front porch and you're
seriously,
you're good to go.
Yeah. It's very good for that. That's for sure. So, and I guess that's a good survival strategy if the power ever goes out. Like, no big deal.
Throw
We
it on the
still have our
patio.
freezer. Exactly. And then we do a lot of cold storage. So I grow a lot of potatoes and butternut squash and onions and garlic, and those stay well through the spring. I still have one onion left, so
There we go.
we'll be good to go. So I'll have about 1 month without onions. So because I haven't harvested mine yet. We're just starting to grow bulbs, so mine are still kind of baby onions. It's pretty much right when they're ready to harvest, it starts to freeze. So
Right.
it's really kind of neck and neck.
Well, that's wild. So you're putting everything up and every different variety. How much of your food do you grow? Do you have a guess on like percentage on how much you're trying to produce in house there?
If I had to guess, I would say close to maybe 70%. Definitely all the produce. I rarely ever buy produce. Same with fruit. We have a lot of just wild berries on our property, and they're almost ripe. The raspberries are in, so I've been snacking on those. But it's going to be an incredible year for blackberries. I think we're going to get buckets and buckets this year. We have an apple tree. We have lots of blueberry plants as well. We also have lots of bears, so I have to be careful when I'm out berry picking. They like the berries as well. So produce.
Do you guys have huckleberry up there?
I haven't seen any, but there might be. I'm not as familiar with that one. I know currants for sure.
I didn't know if it was that far east. I mean, huckleberry is more like Montana, Idaho, that kind of climate.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
And then we do a decent amount of our own meat. So we raise our own meat chickens, and then we have eggs from our egg chickens. And then we're also getting into hunting. So what came with our big property is, I think there's 17 deer stands on our property. So it was a hunting camp basically before we bought it. And so we're like, okay, we got to get into hunting now. It only makes sense. And so we got our first deer last year. This upcoming year, we're hoping to get more. So I still outsource some things, a little bit of beef, but not as much anymore now that we have the venison and a little bit of pork. Otherwise, we're good on meat. And then I still get raw milk from a farm down the road. So I don't have any dairy animals yet, at least. And then grains I outsource. Okay.
So you outsource grain, and then you're overwintering chickens. What does overwintering chickens look like in, this negative 30 degree? Because it's very different than how I overwinter chickens here, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was a learning process. I made a lot of mistakes along the way because you'll read your chicken books, but they're just giving advice to the general chicken owner. So when you're in northern Minnesota, you're like, oh, that was not sufficient. I need to kind of tweak this a little bit. So some things that I learned along the way, the biggest one are roosting bars. So everything I had read said to use 2x2s. And the chickens do prefer 2x2s. It's just kind of easier for them to grip onto. But the problem with that is their toes hang down and their feathers can't cover their toes. And so I got a lot of frostbitten toes as a result. And so I've since switched all my roosting bars to 2x4s so that their feet sit flat on there. And then their feathers can cover their feet. And since I've done that, been no issues with frostbitten toes. So that was a good learning moment.
Wow.
I also greatly grew to appreciate the value of a covered run. So my first couple of years with chickens, it was just, a structure with chicken wire over it or whatever. And then when you have snow on the ground for most of the year, I realized that the chickens don't really care for it that much. They didn't really come out of the coop much. And so they just kind of sat there in the coop, stir crazy, and not to mention lots of poop in there that I had to clean up. And that also created humidity, and humidity is, what can lead to frostbite. And so it's just kind of and then it became a mud pit in there in the spring once all that snow melted. And so we quickly built a covered run, and that has been a game changer. I highly recommend that for anybody, even if you're not in a northern climate. It's just so nice to have a dry run. It keeps the snow out. And then I did do the extra layer of wrapping the run with plastic. And then it's actually really comfortable in there. The chickens love that run space then. The snow doesn't blow in, so it's not drifting in. And then it warms up with the sun coming through the plastic. And they're out there pretty much all day. So it helps just kind of give them activity, get some sunshine, they're happier, and then there's less poop in the coop, which helps with the humidity issue as well.
Right. So like most of our, southern or significantly more southern growers like myself, like in Southeast Missouri, my chickens are on pasture, even though, it's still winter pasture. But even if I'm doing an overwinter mix that doesn't winter kill, I can still keep them out on the green. We might have a couple weeks where snow doesn't melt off entirely, but that's max. And in that context, I can take all the chickens with a portable coop. I can move them into a greenhouse. I can move them into a lot of different options. But for the most part, my winters aren't that bad. Like our worst week was probably, we had 4 days that was like in the negatives. Obviously my pond froze, but in that it's like, okay, I can do a little bit of a supplemental heat lamp if it's in the negatives. But for the most part, as long as your chickens are dry and they can handle down really, really cold.
They really can. I'm actually pretty careful about how often I use my heat lamp. I only turn it on when it hits -20. And so far, so good. I like to let them acclimate to the cold, because the last thing I need to do is have them acclimated to, let's say, 10 degrees, and the heat power goes out, and then the coop drops to -20, -30 on a really cold night, and then it would just be disaster. So I rarely kick mine on.
But also within that management, in the same way of like a winter garden, depending on where you live and the climate that you live in, if you've got drastic fluctuations between hot and cold, the body isn't able to adapt in the same way that your plants aren't able to adapt as well. So there's kind of that like layer, like if you're still getting warm days of 60, 70, degree nice days, and then we're plummeting down to, the tens, it's harder for any livestock or any plant to be able to handle those temperature swings.
Absolutely.
Which we're talking about a ton in a bunch of other more technical growing interviews. But this is super cool. This is interesting to me. That 2x4 flat foot, keep it covered, is interesting. So I want to know, what does a typical day look like for chores for you running a homestead from October to May when it's just cold out? How do you not go stir crazy? Like, how do you care for yourself a little bit?
That's
you have those big lights in your face, right?
Right. I have purchased those in the past, the happy light or whatever, but I don't know, it kind of worked, but it was kind of more agitating to me. I ended up not liking it very much. So to answer your question, there's a few things there. One is, at least as Minnesotans, I feel like we really lean into that and we almost hibernate. And it's something that I kind of crave by the fall. Like, I'm ready to just like batten everything down, just cozy on up. And a couple layers to it. One, having an indoor winter hobby is a game changer. So I'm big into sewing, crafting, I like crocheting. And so just having those inside projects that I can immerse myself in. If I didn't have those, winter would be miserable. If I was just watching TV waiting for it to be over, you're not going to be happy.
Right.
And same with Ryan. He has his own shop projects that he loves too. And then the other part of it is, find ways to be outside that bring you joy. So we actually really enjoy winter activities. We love snowboarding. We love cross-country skiing, which we have a 7-mile long trail system here on our property. And so anytime we had fresh snow, like I was like, yay, I'm going out cross-country skiing. Bring the dogs, and it's super fun. And we love snowmobiling. We have snowmobile trails that are out in here. We love ice fishing. We have friends over to play broom ball. Have you ever heard of broom ball?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, love it. So much fun. And so, you really just kind of have to embrace it. And some days are easier than others. Usually by March, April, when I'm seeing all my southern gardener friends out there planting things, that gets a little rough.
Yep.
But you just kind of have to find a new rhythm. And I actually find it really restorative. This last winter was my first winter to not hibernate, because we had such a mild winter. We only had to plow snow one time. Like, it was crazy.
Whoa.
And We had bare ground pretty much all winter, which was good for our first year here on this property. That allowed us to do a lot of cleanup and stuff. Our property was kind of a mess, so we got ahead on our to-do list, but I didn't get to rest and like nestle in and do my winter hobbies like I normally do. And I kind of felt it by spring. I was kind of almost dreading gardening season. It was like, wait, I'm not ready. I haven't hibernated yet. So,
Right.
yeah.
And here we are, like, talking about winter gardening for the majority of the nation in July, and we're like, oh, we just want to light the fire and snuggle up. Like, that's we're all like dreaming of that because we're so hot, we're so tired, we're like, oh, we're done. But the last thing that we want to think about is like more time in the garden. And so it's kind of a weird like juxtaposition of like, okay, we need to be planning our winter garden now and setting things up now. What does a winter checklist look like, and what do you monitor for like your property, for your animals, for I don't know, it's a newer homestead, but like do you intentionally do any sort of cover cropping for your garden to overwinter your garden well?
Great question. So for the garden, I've not done any cover cropping. That's something that's kind of been in the back of my head, but I haven't done it yet. I do mulch my garden pretty heavily. So I do organic straw around the plants, and then I do wood chips on the walking paths. So wood chips stay, but I've always been someone to remove the straw in the fall just because I'm just paranoid about harboring pests in there. But I will put fresh straw down around my perennials. So things like certain herbs and my rhubarb and my blueberry plants or whatever, just to give them some extra protection. So I will do that. But otherwise I'm kind of in the cleanup clan there. And so far so good. The snow itself is such a protective blanket. As long as we have a normal winter. This past winter was so odd, but normally the snow does it for me.
Right, because the snow is a great insulator.
Yeah.
Now, for this past winter, when you didn't have snow, but you were still average temps in the like -35 range, like regularly, right?
Actually not. This was such a weird
warm.
winter. It was warm, mild, no snow. It was.
But what's mild to you? Like, what are your lows in the nights for the majority of winter season?
The lows in the nights. So I think we got down into the negative teens. Like that's all the lower we got this year. It wasn't bad.
Okay. So with minimal snow and minimal like temps, do you feel like that's what's making the mosquito season so much heavier there this year?
Absolutely. That, and we have had incredible amounts of rain. I've watered my garden one time, and that was like almost 2 months ago. It's just been rain. It rained 3 times yesterday. So that is just creating continuous puddles for even more mosquito breeding. It's been pretty awful this year. And the ticks. We've had a lot of ticks this year too, because I think we didn't have that die off like we normally do.
And so a challenge point there with this new weather changes, you have a very, very short growing season. You know, when you have a lot of rain all through your summer, it can be both a blessing and a curse in the garden. You're probably fighting a lot of like fungal pressure and different blight issues, depending on temperatures. How do you combat that with a very short growing season?
Yes, thankfully our temperatures have not been warm. We've been in the 60s and 70s. I know most of the country has been experiencing crazy high temps, but yeah, we've been not very warm. So I've been keeping my eye out for blight and fungal issues, but none so far. But this week we finally creeped into the 80s. It's finally starting to feel like summer. So I'll be keeping an eye and kind of seeing if anything bubbles up. My favorite product, I guess, for that is neem oil. I feel like that's helped me quite a bit with the fungal growth, but I can't even remember the last time I actually had to use it, maybe 6 years ago. So it's on hand. We'll see if I have to use it. Probably not.
Gotcha. I have so many other questions on what I would like to go into in terms of like winter growing, and your ability in zone 3, now 4. What do people do? Number one, I got to ask this question first. The dairy down the road, how miserable is their life trying to milk any sort of dairy animal in that sort of environment through the winter?
Yeah, I know they do have a barn. I'm not sure if it's heated or not, but I do know they have a fully enclosed barn of some sort with lots of bedding and hay. But I would imagine you'd at least want a little space heater, right next to you while you're doing the milking and everything. Because that would be intense.
Right. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way, and that my mind going crazy on your neighbor that's providing your milk, going, man, they are working really hard. I bet you're paying them well for that milk, right?
Yep. Well, we actually barter. I do chickens and they do milk, and we swap. So it works pretty good.
I think you got a great end of the deal.
Yeah, I think so too.
You got a great end of the deal.
I'm okay with it. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. Talk to me about this you have some future plans for your property, and maybe do you have some pictures you could bring up and kind of show people your property, what you're looking like? Are you able to share your screen there? I would love to kind of get a little farm tour. I'm sure people have probably jumped onto your Instagram handle and kind of already at this point looked up the Homesteading RD and are checking out your Instagram, but let's go ahead and bring that up for people.
Maybe let's start with my garden and then we'll move on to future plans. So this is our current homestead spot. Can you see my pointer if I point it?
Sure can.
Awesome. Yeah. So this roof back here is our shop, and then our little cabin is back here. So this is where we're currently living, in that 960 square foot cabin. And thankfully, this area was already cleared from the previous owner. So I was like, great, that's where my garden's going to go. So here it is here. I just threw in a in-ground garden. Here's the main chicken coop with the big covered run. And then here is the chicken tractor. So this is where our meat chickens go, and they just make their way through the field here. And then this is our other chicken tractor where I keep my teenage chicks until they're ready to join the big ones in the main coop.
How big is that entire meadow or cleared space that we're looking at?
So my garden is 1,300 square feet. I don't know if that helps as far as scale goes. So this whole thing is maybe 150. Okay. 150 by 150-ish.
Yep.
Yeah. And so this is our temporary homestead. So this is the kicker. So we moved in knowing that this wasn't going to be our forever home. We didn't want to live in our 960 square foot cabin forever. And so our goal was to at least move into here, get comfortable, save up for a few years, and then start building out our forever homestead further back on the property. Because this is actually kind of close to the road, and we really wanted to be immersed further back on our property. And so let me show you. Oh, here's another overhead view of my garden. This is kind of earlier on in the spring. Yeah. And then this is the one I want. No, here we go.
Ooh, I love that.
So this is our build site. So this is for about half a mile back on our property. And this is the very beginnings. And so this is what we're currently building today. Actually, the concrete company is here right now as we speak, pouring the flooring. So this is going to be Ryan's shop. So we debated if we wanted to build our house first or the shop first, and
he won.
He won. I know. Sometimes I'm like, dang, should we have done the house first? But honestly, the cabin is fine, and we're really short on space as far as just storing. We're parking our vehicles outside right now, which is not very fun when you have 9 months of winter and you have to scrape your car, and just being able to store things. And we still have all our furniture from our big house that we're hanging on to. So we're like, yeah, we really need the storage. And then Ryan's office will be able to go in here, which means I can kick him out of the cabin and I'll have more space in here.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just one step at a time. So this is where this is going to go. And you can kind of just see the overall view. We are largely wooded. And then on the right here, there's kind of this clearing here. This is where our house is going to go.
Okay.
So it's we need to clear out the woods here, but this is going to be a fully off-grid homestead. Okay. And so we're going to do a whole solar field, which is going to go around here. We're going to have a wood boiler to heat both the shop and the house. And then we're also going to do geothermal. So we can kind of use that to also for heating and cooling. And then also when we build the house someday, we'll be able to build a big attached greenhouse, which is going to be amazing. I can't wait. And that is really what's going to solve our winter growing problem.
So in that greenhouse, the plans that you have, what is going to be your primary fuel for heating that through the night? I mean, you're going to have, which in the winter, I'm imagining is pretty darn vast, right?
Yeah, so that was the big question mark. I had a small greenhouse at our 5-acre homestead. It was just kind of built over a raised bed. And while it did provide some season extension, it couldn't hold heat really. So by the early morning hours, whatever temperature was outside, it was inside the greenhouse. So it helped a little bit, but it wasn't great. So Ryan and I have been chatting about, okay, how can we level up here? I want to be able to grow food in the winter. I want to maybe grow things that you typically can't grow in Minnesota, like citrus trees or maybe even banana trees. And, who
wow,
knows?
You're getting lofty there.
Got to dream big, I guess. And so we started to look into heated greenhouse designs. I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos. And I think what we've landed on is it's what do you call it? Like a ground earth contact greenhouse. So instead of it being a fully just glass or, a typical greenhouse where it's see-through all the way around, it's going to have actual walls that are insulated around the roof and east, west, and I think the north end. It'll just be the south end that is clear. And so with that, our sun comes pretty much horizontal in the wintertime, very low sun angle. So it'll be that having the roof be solid is no big deal to just come right in, but then it'll also provide shade in the summer when we don't necessarily want all that heat building up. And then geothermal will be for the greenhouse as well. So now our geothermal tubes have to be 10 feet down. So they're past that frost line. And it's about 55 degrees down there year round. And so we can pull that 55 degrees in to cool it in the summer, pull in that 55 degrees to warm it in the winter. And then it'll also be tied into our wood boiler system. So that'll be kind of a backup if we need to.
Yeah, then you'll have a radiant floor or at least heat lines coming in to warm up your soil. Yeah. Ooh, that's an expansive project. That's a big project.
Yeah, it'll be a big project, but I think it's going to be just awesome in terms of obviously being able to grow food, but more than that, just to be able to have something alive to walk into on a January day. It means a lot for the soul.
Yeah, not to mention if it could just be the warm, balmy, like 30 degrees.
Yeah, even above freezing. It's like, whoa.
like 30 degrees. It's still freezing in there, but not quite the negative. Oh, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. And then we'll, of course, do like the heat sink stuff, like concrete, probably walking paths and barrels of some sort. And might even keep fish in there so we could have fish for harvesting. And we'll just see. Some girls want fancy vacations and cars and purses. I want a greenhouse.
I definitely understand. That's how we work.
Yep. So we'll see. It's still in the dream phase, but
very, very cool. Well, hey, I want to ask a few questions just about like, what do you feel like is the most challenging part of homesteading in general?
That's a great question. And I feel like there are so many things I could grapple for because I think homesteading is a lot harder in general than most people realize. I feel like it's kind of glamorized anymore by a lot of different people. But I would say the most challenging thing is just battling nature and the weather and the unpredictableness of it. I think that's the overarching challenge because you just never know what's around the corner. It's like we had 3 years of drought and then this year we're buried in rain. And so you always have a new challenge. And with that rain, we lost 6 of our meat chicks last week because there was this terrible downpour and flooding and they got chilled and wet and never had that before. There's just always a new challenge to overcome. Maybe it's a new pest, in the garden or, a brutal winter that you weren't prepared for. And Mother Nature, man, she's she's fast and furious sometimes. You never know what she's going to throw at you. And
Right.
yeah, and there's just always a new challenge. And I kind of like that, to be honest. If I lived somewhere where the weather was the same every day, pretty predictable, that'd be kind of boring. I kind of like not knowing what's going to come and a new chance to learn. And yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge.
I would agree. I would agree.
Some people, it's really high temperatures. Us, it's really cold temperatures. And we kind of view it as just a challenge. Like, how are we going to do this day? Like, how are we going to make it? What are we going to tackle today to survive?
Right. At least in the pictures and the image and kind of that sort of thing, and just the vastness of the acreage and how you operate, do you guys, do you feel like it's pretty challenging to have community? What does your local community look like? Is it really, really isolated? How rural are you? Like,
yeah, that's been a big challenge for this new homestead. Our 5-acre homestead, I was 15 minutes from Target, and my neighbors were just right there. I could holler and they'd be able to hear me. Where here, I think on our 11-mile long road, there's only 5 people that live here. It's mostly just seasonal cabins. So sometimes people pop in and out, but for the most part, it's just us, which is nice in some regards, but it can be kind of isolating at times, and it's hard to get help, especially when we're talking animal chores if you want to go somewhere. So that's been the biggest challenge. Like, who's going to take care of the chickens if we want to go visit family for the weekend or whatever? And in that community piece, I think that is an under-recognized piece in the self-sufficiency world. It's kind of, we're always focused on what can I do myself and all these things. And I think learning how to work with your community and do bartering. I love that bartering piece. Like, I probably actually won't ever get a milk cow because I enjoy going and visiting that milk farm down the road and being able to connect with them and provide something for them that they don't necessarily want to keep on hand. And so my community is small, so it's just those couple things like the raw milk farm. And I do have another homesteading friend. I say it's around the corner, but she's about 20 minutes away by car.
Yeah, I think rural communities have that kind of mentality. Oh, it's not that far. It's only 40 minutes. It's a 40-minute drive. 2-hour drive to the big city. People are like, what?
Exactly. But there's no cell service out here, so I need to make sure I have all my ducks in a row before I leave, because it'll be another half hour till I have cell reception again. And
so if you were going to town to get your bag of flour and grain and coffee and supplies, your hardtack for the covered wagon, how far is that? Where's the first town side of life, right?
Yeah, the first semblance of life is about 30 minutes away, and it's all kind of like mom and pop shops. If I actually wanted to go to a Walmart or a Target, it's probably over an hour for sure. Maybe an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
So it's a decent jaunt. It's not impossible, so it's not like I have to drive all day, to get there, but definitely have to be crafty about my errand runs. I just kind of wait. That's probably one of the biggest shifts. I've had to really learn to be patient. I'm kind of someone where if something's on my list, I want to get it done. And so it's like,
you don't forget stuff at the store.
No. And you don't just go driving 2 hours just for 2 things. And so as you wait and you build up your list, and then you spend basically the whole day running errands. And then you come home and you're very glad to be home.
Yep.
But yeah, the other thing that I've been loving for community is Azure Standard. Are you familiar with them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's been huge for me too. I didn't realize I've been doing Azure Standard for years, but until I moved here, I really didn't appreciate it, because now it's like, oh, wait, these are essentially my neighbors. These are my people, and I've been making a lot of friends, and it's just been a great way to connect with people.
So do you have a local drop point near you, or?
Near-ish. It's about 40 minutes away, but but it's doable. It's still worth it for me.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. Well, before we kind of close this off, is there anything else that that you would love for people to know about the homesteading life, trying to put up all your food, maybe if they're dabbling in this journey or they're like, man, I think I want to move to the Northwoods, like what do you want people to know?
I guess I want people to know that homesteading is a definitely big spectrum, and I've kind of traveled through that whole line, and you really have to do some deep digging and figure out where you want to be, where it can, like what we're doing over here on the remote living and off-grid big property can seem really appealing. It's also really hard. And so I always try to be transparent about that. If anyone listening here follows me on Instagram, especially in my stories, I feel like most of my journey happens in the stories. I'm pretty open about the struggles here and just the life here. And it's awesome. We love it. And I don't regret it, but it's not for everybody either. And so I think, there's no shame in just a backyard garden. I think that's awesome. Having 5 chickens if your city allows it. So don't feel pressured that you have to do this big ordeal. There's still a lot of things you can do where you're at, and partnering with local farmers, I think, is awesome. Farmers still need people to feed, right? I think those of us that can grow our own, that's great, but farmers still need a job too. So, and I guess with that, I want people to know too that my account isn't only about like this side of homesteading. Like I teach skills about everything that can be applied, even if you're in an apartment. Like we're talking about making kombucha, you can do that, or learning how to grind your own flour. So I don't want anyone to feel intimidated, I guess, by my content. While we dabble a little bit on the big stuff, there's so many things that you can apply no matter where you're at to make those small steps to being more self-sufficient.
Awesome. Well, I think that is so good. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining me in this kind of hour of conversation of what it's like to grow in the Northwoods, what winters, extreme winters look like, the challenge there. I want to challenge you, because this is the Winter Garden Challenge. I want you to try and grow something that you're going to harvest out of your garden for Thanksgiving.
Ooh, okay. Do I have to pick it on Thanksgiving?
I would love to see that. So maybe it comes out of the garden on Thanksgiving, because you could have like 4 feet of snow.
Right. I'm like, okay.
Maybe there's a cold frame, something in there just kind of pushing it. Maybe it's you're like, hey, look, it's microgreens off my counter.
I do that all winter long, for sure. The microgreens are wonderful to have a little bit of life there. But I've been meaning to make a cold frame. I have some extra like greenhouse panels laying around. So I just need to actually get around to making it. But challenge accepted.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Katie, thank you so much for a great hour. I'm sure people are going to get some value from it. I think a lot of people are going to move to Minnesota now because of the beautiful Northwoods. Until they go to your Instagram and they see the bug suit because of the mosquitoes that you have, then they're going to be like, not for me.
Not for everybody.
Sunny Florida is where I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Katie, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.